Hey everybody! Today I'm making blue mushrooms for a theme party. This video shows 3 different ways of making blue mushrooms with Rice Krispies as the base. I have a separate video that shows using marshmallow fondant to make blue mushrooms and an apple. The marshmallow fondant is very sweet like candy. The Rice Krispie covered in almond bark is also very sweet like a candy. The Jello is much less sweet and is cool and refreshing. To make these mushrooms with a Rice Krispie base, I'm using the packaged snack-sized Rice Krispie bars. There are 16 bars in a box. The stickiness of these is almost perfect. Also, the size and shape is good for portion control and for making many of the same size. The stem should be at least half the width of the cap, so it stands upright easily. You don't want these tipping over. And we're going to make the cap have a larger rounded bump for the almond bark coating, and the cap should be circular and flat for the Jello versions. The rounded cap is a bar that's cut into a square. The corners of the square are rounded off. Then the edges of the circle are pressed down and shaped. The Rice Krispies are mostly puffed air, so pressing them into shape is easy. The rectangle left after cutting the square is rolled into the stem shape, and this is really just like rolling Play-Doh. I got 2 mushrooms out of 1 Rice Krispie bar, one with the flat cap and one with the rounded cap. If you are a young person, be sure to ask permission from an adult before beginning this project or using a knife or the microwave. The next step is to melt the almond bark or white chocolate. This is almond bark that I'm using. 2 cubes is enough for these 4 mushrooms. Use a microwave-safe dish. Melt on high for 60 seconds, then stir. If small chunks remain, melt 15 seconds and stir, and so on until it's all melted. Dip the Rice Krispie pieces in the melted white almond bark. Use a spoon to drop it onto pieces that didn't get covered. We do want them all covered, at least lightly. Then set the covered pieces down to drip off. After about a minute of dripping, move the pieces to a new location and away from the first drip puddles. Wax paper works well to set the mushrooms on for this dripping and drying. The almond bark hardens quickly. You may need to reheat it if it cools before you're done. The first coat of almond bark is dried. That takes about 15 minutes. There is enough almond bark left in the bowl to use for the blue top. Just heat it up again, then add a drop of blue food coloring. The mushrooms in the game are only light blue, so this doesn't need very much food coloring. Stir in the food coloring. Work quickly. The almond bark hardens fast. Dip the mushroom cap in the blue almond bark and spin it around. If it starts to harden while you're still working with it, you'll get ridges and peaks on the cap. If it's still soft when you dip the mushroom cap in there, it will smooth out when you set the mushroom cap down. Set the mushroom back on the wax paper to dry. After about 15 minutes of drying, the mushrooms can be moved to an airtight plastic container for storage. And you should eat the mushrooms within a day or 2. The Rice Krispie bars do harden if exposed to air, and we don't really want to eat hard Rice Krispie bars. The next version is the Rice Krispie placed in a Jello mold. If you're not familiar with a Jello mold, they're usually a thin metal pan that is formed with a special shape. The Jello is poured in, and after it hardens, the mold is floated in hot water and then flipped over so the Jello pops out. I don't have any mushroom-shaped Jello molds, so I tried to make a mold out of plastic wrap over the top of these smoothie jars. The key part of this is to have the mold small enough and with a rounded shape. This is berry blue Jello. Young people may need assistance making this Jello. Stir the Jello into the boiling water per the package directions. After the Jello is dissolved, add the cold water according to the package directions. I was surprised how cool the Jello was by the time the cold water was added. I could spoon it into the plastic wrap right away without any worries of it melting. If you overfill the mold, you can take some of the Jello out. The flat-topped Rice Krispie mushrooms are placed in the mold upside down. Then let these set for 4 hours so the Jello can solidify and be its wobbly self. The Jello has set overnight in the mold. Now it's time to remove the mushrooms. Very carefully peel the plastic away. It is possible to let the Jello stay on the Rice Krispie. This Jello is quite thin. The blueberry Jello itself is really tasty. It's really good. The mushrooms in the game glow, so the Jello is a way to try to get that glowing effect. After eating one of these mushrooms with the Jello on top, I found that the liquid Jello has soaked into the Rice Krispie, and that makes it soft. It's not really a great food texture. The flavors are good, but still with that texture, children or even adults might not like that because they're expecting Rice Krispies to have a certain texture and Jello to have a certain texture and not this kind of mushy stuff that's in between. To get a much better result, we have the third Rice Krispie version. For this version, I'm just going to use a Rice Krispie bar that has been cut and shaped. The cap on this is flat. The stem has to be wide enough to support the weight of the Jello. We're going to add a scoop of Jello to set on top of this Rice Krispie. This scoop of Jello is closer to the glowing look in the game. With the light shining through it, it does kind of have a really cool, shimmering kind of a look. This version has to be made very close to the time it's eaten. It can't stand very long, and the Rice Krispies would get hard, and the top would get soggy. But it tastes good. The Jello with the Rice Krispie cap has a slightly sweet yet crunchy texture with the cool, refreshing Jello as a contrasting texture. So it's good. So, well, oops. I feel like I'm working with a blob. They do tend to fall over if the Jello gets off center. And maybe this is something that children might like to put together themselves as a little project, a little something to do at the party. I have another video for making marshmallow fondant mushrooms and apples. These fondant mushrooms are very good looking, really easy to shape, and very much taste like candy. That fondant is in a separate video that comes after this one. Also check out my other videos and subscribe to this channel. Have fun!